Hey y'all, I'm Brenda with Blessings and Bread. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm excited today because it's November and I'm starting to prepare for Thanksgiving. One of the things I always do ahead of time is I get my dressing made early and put it in the freezer, so that's out of the way and that task is done when Thanksgiving gets there, and it saves a little time right in that hectic time when we're doing all those last minute preps for Thanksgiving meal. Today I'm making cornbread dressing, and I have a recipe that we follow, but it is just a guideline. We do not have to follow it exactly, but it is a guideline. We're going to begin with, of course, cornbread. Since it's cornbread dressing, I prefer yellow cornbread, so I've made 2 recipes of my cornbread recipe, which I will link at the end of this video and in the description. And it makes basically a 9x13 pan. You can also, if you don't want to make scratch cornbread, if you'll buy 3 packages of cornbread mix and make those and bake them in a 9x13 pan, that will be about the same amount of cornbread that I have now. And as you can see, I've already crumbled my cornbread. So let's get maybe a closer shot at this, and we'll get busy making dressing for Thanksgiving. To make dressing, I start with the cornbread, but I also have taken 3 pieces of this was butter bread, I think, or white bread, and I broke it into small little bite-sized pieces. And then I actually put mine in my toaster oven and dried it out a little bit before I put it in here. I've not always done that step, but I think it probably works a little better if you have your bread cubes here dried out a little bit. But I'm just going to mix both the cornbread and the breadcrumbs. Now that those are kind of mixed together, and we'll be mixing more as we go, but I'm going to set those aside now, and we're going to combine our vegetables, and I'm going to saute them, but I'm going to saute them in the microwave just to speed things up. And I did create a recipe for this several years ago. Some people were asking for my recipe, and at that time I didn't even have one. I just knew how to make dressing. My mom had taught me how, and I just knew how to do it. So I though did one year make it and measure everything, so I knew exactly about how I made it. So I'm going on that, and I like quite a bit of celery, so you can use anywhere from a half a cup to a cup, but I usually use a cup, and I like to chop mine in pretty small pieces. Also, already in my little bowl here, or measuring cup, I have a stick of butter, which is a half a cup of butter. And I usually use unsalted butter. That way I can salt my dressing to taste. And then I have a half a cup of onion chopped. And that was about half of a large onion. So it would be half of a large onion or a small onion. Those didn't get chopped, and I don't want any big pieces. All right, so we're going to put this in the microwave for about 8 minutes, and then we'll come back and finish combining the other ingredients for our dressing. Okay, the onions and celery are out of the microwave, and now to this bowl, I'm actually going to go ahead and add 1 can of cream of chicken soup. In the recipe, it says 2 cans, but 1 to 2 cans is fine. For years, I didn't even put this in my dressing. So if you don't even have any, you can leave it out. But I do think it gives it a richer flavor. when that's in your dressing. So but I'm going to stir that in with the vegetables. I find that it's easier to, if I'll get all of my liquids kind of mixed in here together, except for my eggs, I find that it makes it easier to mix into the cornbread. Once this is mixed together, I'll be adding my spices. Sometimes everybody always likes my dressing and asks me to make it. I even have some people ask me to make their dressing for their holidays. And I think it's really about two things. I think it's how I have it seasoned, and it's also how the texture of it. So those two things. So the next thing is to add the seasonings. And what I measured and figured out that I'm doing about 1 tablespoon. But I will say all of this has to do with your taste. So if you want to start with less and then make sure that it's not too much. But I think this is a pretty mild flavor. So I have 1 tablespoon of poultry seasoning. I have 1 teaspoon of sage. Sage is pretty strong, and poultry seasoning actually has some sage in it. So 1 teaspoon of sage is enough for me. And then what I like to add is 1 tablespoon of celery seed. And I'm going to stir all that in, and then we need to add salt and pepper. It just calls for a teaspoon of salt. And you might think that's not very much, but we are going to add some chicken broth. And if your chicken broth has some salt in it, that will also add to the saltiness of your dressing. And then it only calls for 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper. I'm going to mix all of that in there. And then we're going to begin to add the liquids now to the cornbread. And I would like to start with a little bit of chicken broth, so it'll make it easier to mix in all of this, because this is a little bit thicker. All right, well, that's there. Got a little bigger spoon here. Might help stir that better. Keep adding a little bit of chicken broth because that's going to help that. Stir in. The amount of chicken broth I'm going to use will also kind of varies from time to time. It just has a lot to do with the bread and how much it's soaking up, and maybe the humidity sometimes I think makes a difference. And I think what happens as you add the chicken broth, that bread will soak up that chicken broth. And as it soaks it up, I'm making a mess. As that soaks up that chicken broth, it kind of soaks it up. So it may seem kind of runny at first, but then as it sets, it begins to get a little more. Thicken up a little bit. All right, I'm going to now stop adding the chicken broth and add my eggs. And it calls for 3 large eggs. What I use is 1 egg for every package of cornbread mix. And like I said at the beginning, you can use like 3 packages of cornbread mix to make your cornbread. And now before I add those eggs, I'm going to go ahead and mix them together so the yolks and the whites are mixed together. Sort of like if you were going to make scrambled eggs. I'm not really beating them, but I'm mixing them together so that breaking that yolk and that white down. I don't want to have egg whites cooked in my dressing. All right, I think that's good. So next I'm going to add my eggs, stir those in. The eggs are what will help the dressing to set. If you don't have enough eggs in your dressing, it just never wants to set up. All right, this is coming together really well, but it's probably about like I would like it after it's baked, but it's going to need a little more chicken broth. Like I said, that when I put together the recipe I did 6 cups, so there were 8 in here. So I always make a little extra. Ooh, looks like a lot of broth, but it's gonna stir in. But that may be all I need. I don't want to overdo it, because if I overdo it, then it will not set up when you bake it. But as you can see, as I stir that in, it's just soaking in to some of that. It's kind of soaking into the bread. Gonna let it set a little bit here, but I forgot I should taste it to make sure it's got enough salt. Should have tasted it before I added my eggs, but I didn't. I'm still gonna taste it. Let's just see. That's good. I think I am gonna add a little bit more salt, maybe just a half a teaspoon. Of course, you can always add salt after it's baked, but it's best if you get it right before. I'm actually not going to bake this today because it's still almost, I guess, more than about 2 weeks away for Thanksgiving, a week and a half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into a freezer bag and freeze it. And then when it's time for Thanksgiving, I can take it out and bake it. Oh, that's better. Now, just that half a teaspoon. Trying to decide. Now, this is where you just have to decide how much juice to put in there, because it will set up. Let's see how much I've done. I have about a half cup. I may do just a tiny bit more, maybe about a half more cup, and stir it in, because as I said, it will set up more when you bake it. Yes, I like that better. And so that's about the texture. I don't know if you can see that on the screen, but that is the texture I like when it's done. So now all I have to do is get some gallon bags and fill my gallon bags with this and put it in the freezer. All right, I am completely through the dressing, and you can see I put it in a 1 gallon. It all fit in one 1 gallon Ziploc bag, and then I will lay it flat in the freezer and freeze it flat. And then you just need to thaw it out in the refrigerator in time to bake it. You'll bake it at 350 degrees, and it will probably take about 45 minutes. But how long it takes to bake will depend on your dish and how deep your dressing is. There is one important thing about baking dressing, is you do not need to bake it till it's completely done, because there will be some residual heat in that it will continue to bake a little bit or to cook after it comes out of the oven. So you always want to stop right before it's completely done in the middle, and then take it out and it will finish baking. I hope you've enjoyed this video about cornbread dressing. This is definitely a Southern tradition in my family where we always have dressing. I will say, if you're cooking a turkey, you might just make dressing, but what you can do is to cook or roast a chicken, pull it off the bone and add it to the dressing. Or even yesterday, I made some other dressing and I actually cooked a couple of chicken breasts in my Instapot, and then I shredded that and added it to the dressing. So because I don't think we're going to actually use a turkey this year for Thanksgiving. We're just going to have that chicken and dressing and make it a little easier. We're traveling out west to see our daughter and my grandbabies for Thanksgiving, and so we wanted it quick and easy. So either way, you can just make plain dressing, or you can add a shredded chicken meat to your dressing. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I'd love for you to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to see more of my videos, and I will see you the next time I'm in my kitchen, on my porch, or in my garden.